Hello, hello. Okay. All right, that should be fine. All right. Okay, Manny. So I know due to your current situation, the internet is very spotty and it's not reliable, like in where you're staying at versus when you were at your house. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna give you this video lesson recorded, and I'll just go over the problems that you emailed to me the other day. So I went ahead and created a Python project here, and I created a main.py file. You could you could do this. You could create all of this on your laptop or computer, desktop computer too. And I'm going to start by going over the first problem, and then I'll talk about the second one, and then finally the third one. And I did make some little comments along the way, as well as I copied the instructions that you have provided me, so I had something to work off of. So for this first problem, here, let me actually label this as exercise 1. So for this first problem, which if I'm not mistaken, you got these exercises from the Python book, right? So the first exercise asks you to create a list of 10 numbers and then write a Python program to print the square of each number. In this exercise, you'll create a list of 10 numbers and then write a program that prints a square. That's what I just said. This task will help you practice creating lists. Lists are a data type. They're a kind of, you can think of them as like a collection of items in Python. And this will also help you practice using for loops to iterate over elements. And finally, it'll help you perform basic mathematical operations. In this case, you'll be using the exponentiation operator, which is the two little stars. So the solution to this is pretty short, but if this is your first time doing it, maybe you might be thinking this is going to require a lot of work, or maybe it might be hard to visualize this in your head because it's your first time looking at such a problem like this. So what I did was I first created a list. So in Python, if you want to create a list, the syntax is like this. Syntax, the list syntax will go, first you provide a variable name, then you say equals, and then you say list. There's actually several ways to do this. So in this case, I used a list and then I did range. You could go ahead and do that and provide some numbers. Maybe this one could be 5 to 10. So the syntax would be starting number, ending number. Right, this would be the syntax, and that's what I did here. I set a variable called numbers, and then I set it equal to list range. So what this does is, first it generates a list of numbers. Which numbers? 1 to 11. So it's going to give, we're going to create a list of the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 11. And then we're going to store them as elements of a list, of a collection, of a number collection. That's really what this list is right here. In this in the context of numbers, this is a number list. And then we store a reference to that with this variable here. Now there's other ways to create lists. You could also do var name equals, you could use this syntax, these two little brackets, open bracket, close bracket. Now you can put your items in here. So you could put item 1, item 2, item 3. When I say item 1, 2, and 3, you could do strings. You could do numbers. So it's really up to you. Strings, numbers, Boolean values, floating point values, which are also numbers with decimal points. So you can create a list of any other data type, of any other type of items. So in this case, I created a list that starts at 1 and goes until the number 11, and I stored it in this variable. So now that I did that, in order to confirm that this is actually working correctly, I can run this. Hold on, let me just close something. I don't want to get interrupted again. Okay, so I can just close this. And if we look at the top here, the output, I'm going to zoom in. The output here says, it gives you this line right here, right? 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. And you see there's brackets, right? Close bracket, open bracket. So we know that this list works. It's showing up. It exists in memory. So that's good. It exists in your computer memory. So I'll leave that there. And then the next part here is we're going over we're using a for loop. So the syntax for a for loop. Again, the for loop can have different versions, different variants. So I'm going to stick with the one that I provided in this example. If you wanted just a blank syntax, the syntax would be something like for, and then you would say var name in, and then you put the name of the list, or you put in list name, or in current list. I'm trying to be as specific as possible. And then inside here you would put you'd run some code here. So that's really the syntax for a for loop. That's the syntax. And then I'm applying that logic here, right? I'm saying for num in numbers. Numbers is the list that we created earlier. Num represents each element of this list. So another way we could have written this one, we could have also said this. We could have said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We could have done that. I'm pretty sure this, so this is not inclusive of 11. If you say range, the second number is not going to be included in the actual list. That's what I mean by it's not inclusive. Anyway, so you could have written your list like this or like this. This one's more easier to understand. This one's also, I mean, it's not hard to understand it, but I mean, if it's your first time, you just have to get used to seeing this. Alright, so I'm going to just comment this out. I'll just say this is the alternate way of declaring the number list. Alright, so going back to this, you say for num in numbers, you print the num, and then if you want to know what the output is going to be, let me zoom out. The output is going to be all of these numbers. 1, then we go to the next line 2, go to the next line 3, go to the next line 4, and that's all this for loop is doing. It's printing out each number. I put this here so we could have like some like a little bit of a gap, right? Remember, \n is used to skip down a few lines. And then I create this other for loop here, which is printing the square of each number. So here I was just printing each number. Now here I'm going to print the square of each number. So it's almost the same. For num in numbers. The only difference is here I'm saying print num star star 2. So these little stars, those little symbols, that means exponentiation. So in reality, this is actually going to be num squared, or num to the power of 2. Something like that, right? If you learned about exponents before, you know what this is. Another way of illustrating this would be, you could do num times num. That would be like the equivalent. So 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16, and it just keeps going. So that's exercise one. It's just covering lists and using the range, using for loops, printing, using the exponentiation operator. If you have any questions about that one, just email me or text me. Otherwise, I highly recommend you write all the code here yourself. If you haven't done, or if you already did something like this, just check that it makes sense, that it's similar. All right, hold on. All right, so now I'm going to start with exercise 2, reading and writing files in Python. So we're going to take the code above, we're going to modify it to read a CSV file. Then we're going to select specific columns and write the output to a new CSV file. So this one has you practice file handling by reading from a text file that contains numbers, squaring the numbers, writing the results to a new file. And yeah, so you're doing reading, writing, and you're also iterating, which means you're going through all the data that's in the file, and you're doing some operations on each line of data. Alright, so for this one, there's some new syntax for you to get familiar with. So for reading from a text file, you need to use something called the open function. You need to provide the letter R, or the character R, which indicates you're setting your program to read mode, to read from a file. You're going to read the entire file line by line, or you could read specific parts of the file. So this is just one possible solution. There are other variations of this solution. If you feel like you have something that is better and it gives you the same result, then you can use that. All right. So what you need to do first is declare a new variable, call it whatever you want, and then I want you to set it equal to, and then I want you to, inside double quotation marks, provide the name of a CSV file. If you don't have the name of a CSV file yet, then it's okay. I mean, if you haven't created a CSV file in the folder that the program is in, like in here, if you haven't done this, it's okay. But if you have, that's also okay. So you pass in the name of the file with .csv as the extension, put it in quotation marks, and then set a variable equal to that. After that, you create a list. It's going to be an empty list. And remember, I showed you earlier this list syntax. This is another way to do it. You could say the variable or the list name equal, and then you could put the brackets. If you put brackets with nothing inside of it, then that means this is an empty list right now. Empty list for now. And then here's where you're going to use this new syntax called with. So if you're wondering why and what is with, it's basically a way to run code in the context of something. So in this case, I want to run this for loop, but I want to do it in the context of reading a file, reading a text file. So we're going to open this file, read it, read the contents, and then we're going to use this for loop to actually go through the file, and we're going to do some operation here with it. So we say with open. Here you're going to, this first argument for this function is going to be the name, is going to be the variable that's connected to the CSV file, which is this one. And then the second argument is going to be what mode you want to read your file in. So, or what mode you want to, what operation you want to do to the file. So I want to read it. So I say R, lowercase r. There's also W. There's an A. W is short for write. A is short for append. And there's many other ones. But I'm just showing you these two because these are the relevant ones for the exercises. And then you say as, and then you say file, So this, I believe this you can also call it whatever you want, but most people just make this variable equal file. It's going to be your text input output object, which means now anything that we do inside this, anything we do under this line that's indented is going to be read, is going to be treated as input output. So here I create a for loop. I say for line in file. Remember earlier I created for loops like for num in numbers. So here, when I say for line in file, I'm basically saying, okay, I want to go through every line of this file. I could have called this something else. I could have called this candy. I could have called this ice cream. Oh, sorry, ice cream. But I'm calling it line because in this context it makes sense. For line in file. So I'm going to explain what's happening here because it's a very long line of code. So what am I doing in this line? So this for loop is going to repeat for as many lines as there are in the file. How do we know how many lines there are? Well, we know the file is called this, right? If we open that file, in this case I put a bunch of numbers in it. So there's 10 lines. 10 lines of numbers. So that means this for loop is going to run 10 times. And we're going to do this each time. What is this? What's happening here? Well, first, we're going to remove the white space from each line. So as this for loop iterates through and repeats 10 times, each line is going to have its white spaces stripped out. And then once we do that, we're going to convert that line. So 100, 200, 300. We're going to convert these to be numbers because remember when we were reading them earlier, they were actually, or no, when you're reading any contents from a text file, they're read in as strings, even if they look like numbers. So we need to convert those to integers. Once we convert them to integers, then once I convert the current line, the current number into an integer, and it's not a string anymore, then I want to raise the power by 2. So I say I say star, star, and then I say 2. So now this, for instance, 200 was a string, and then now it's just an integer 200, and now I raise it to the power of 2. So right, so I could just do this just to confirm. It should be 40,000. Right, 200 times 200 is 40,000. And then what I'm doing is I square each number and then I add them to the list. So then the final step is to add it to this new list here, this empty list. So you say dot append. The list operation known as dot append is responsible for adding elements to the list. So that's what you're going to do there. And that's what's happening here. So you read the first line, which is 100. You strip all the white spaces, any extra white spaces, you strip those. And then you convert the 100 to an integer. And then you raise the power by 2. So 100 times 100. So it should be 10,000. And then you add it to this list. And then you do all of those steps all over again with 200. And then 300, and then 400, and then 500. Until we get to the last number. And then after you're done with that, this list should now have all the new contents that you read in. So how do we prove that? I could say print out the list of squared numbers. So here I could say print my list, print my list of squared nums. And if you look really closely, this line right here has all the squared numbers. So we know that this was a success. So there you go. And then the last thing is I created another file and another variable. So here I create a variable called CSV new file, and then I set it equal to, and then I created a new string which represents a file that's in the same folder. So if you look here, I have two files. This is my new file.csv. And then I do the routine of using with, open, as, file. I do this so I can open the new file, which is actually going to be blank initially. I set it to write mode so we can write inside this file. We can write text. The program will write the text. And then I set up this for loop, for num in my list of squared nums. And then I say file dot write. So for num. So what does this line mean? It basically means, okay, so we open the file. We're gonna write numbers inside the file. So we're gonna start by writing the first number that's inside this list, which is 10,000. Then the second time this for loop runs, we're gonna write 40,000. So you don't use print to write. You're actually gonna say file, which is the file that's over here. The file that's over here, you're gonna use that. You're gonna say file dot write. And then inside write, you can put variables, you can put strings. File dot. On your code editor, you might see a list of functions. So there's write, read, close. There's a lot. And what happens here is I'm gonna write the number, the current number. So at the beginning it'll be 10,000. But you cannot write, I gotta make this comment, you cannot write integers or floats into a file. You have to convert them first into a string. So there's a new function that I just showed you here called str. Str can be used to convert to convert number values into string values. The str function is short for string. So I'm going to pass in each number into this function, turn it into a string, and then I'll say plus to concatenate, which means to add strings together. I'll say plus, and then I'll say \n. So then the result of this is we're going to write into this file. And now if we actually open the file, you'll see here, look, all our squared numbers are in here. And they're all on separate lines. They're not combined together. Oh, sorry. They're not combined together. So that's exercise 2. So it's not too bad. It's really just the syntax you have to get used to looking at, because this does look kind of crazy at first. But once you start to like break it apart and then start looking at each individual piece, it's not that bad. Alright, if you have any questions about that one, just text me or email me about it. And then the final one is going to be exercise 3, which is working with lists and dictionaries. So it's gonna be kind of similar to the previous one. So here we're going to use a list. We're going to make a list of student names and their ages. Then we're going to use another type of collection, or another type of another data type or a collection type called dictionary, to store and access the students' ages. And then this program will iterate through the dictionary, print each student's name and their age. And this will help you be familiar with how Python handles data collections. So again, there's different ways to do this. This is one possible implementation of that. Okay. So how did I set this up? So the first thing I did was I created a list of strings, but more specifically, I created a list of names. So here I used the names of the Beatles. If you listen to the Beatles music, these are the members of the band. So I used them for my example here. I put their names in a list. So there's four elements or 4 items in this list, which means this list is the size of 4, right? I create a new variable to hold the list. I called it student list. And then this one, I'm gonna have to point out the syntax. So syntax for a dictionary. The syntax for a dictionary is as follows. You're going to put the name of the dictionary, and then you'll say equals, and then you're going to use these little curly braces. And then you're going to put your key value pairs in here. So key 1, value 1. Key 2, value 2. Key n, value n. I know it could just keep going on forever, really, or until you run out of memory. So here I created a dictionary called student dictionary. I set it equal to this. What is this? So inside here, you notice there's these little commas. These commas are separating these pairs from each other. So if you remember in a list, you can put one item and then you put a comma, right? And then you do another item here. And then you do another comma, right? In a dictionary, you're actually dealing with pairs of items. So in this case, this first value is actually the first key. And you see this little new symbol here, the 2 dots. I think they call it a colon symbol. What that means is this key is linked to some value. It's paired up with some value. They're like partners. Think of them as partners. You can't separate them. They're supposed to be together. So here's the key, and then every key has a value, and every value has a key. So here's the value for this key. So this would be key 1. This would be value 1, and they're linked by the 2 dots. Or the colon symbol. And then you do a comma here. And then here's another key. This could be key 2. And then you put the colon, sorry. And then you put the colon, and then here's value 2. So these are paired together. These are the third ones. These are the fourth ones. And just to finish this lesson up, because I know I talked a lot, so you might have to rewatch this video more than one time if you feel confused, or you can always email me or text me. It's fine. So I create this dictionary which represents it represents all the student names and their ages together. Why did I use a dictionary? Well, the alternative would have been to create 2 lists. And then these lists could have had... You could have had a list of the students' names and then another list of their ages. The problem is you can't do this. You can't have strings and numbers all inside one list. So that's the reason why in this exercise they want you to use a dictionary, because here you actually can have different data types. You can have strings and integers together, paired up together. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about this. Let me just move some comments around. I'm actually going to change this to a multi-line comment so I'm not restricted. Okay, nice. There you go. Let me close this. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is here. In this implementation, you can loop through the list and use the list elements as dictionary keys in order to access the dictionary values, which in this context is the age of each student. So all you have to do is create another for loop. You can structure it, you can format it like this. You could say for student in, and then just make sure you're referencing the list that we created here. In student list. You could have called this first part anything. You could have said like stud, you could have said st, you could have said estudiante. Like you could have this could be anything, but I put student because in this context it's more easier to understand. So I want to go through the list of students. That's basically what this is saying. And for each student, I want to print out a sentence about them. So I want to say student here. Remember F strings. Right, we are using F strings here. Formatted strings. We went over this before. We're saying print student is, and then you're going to see this big thing, and then it says years old. So what is this? So if we go in closer, we focus on what I highlighted here. What I'm doing here is I'm accessing an element from the dictionary. But the way you access a dictionary element is different from how you access a list element. If I wanted to access a list element, like here, access first element, student list, and I wanted to print. If I wanted to print John's name, I'd have to do this. 0 means index 0, and index 0 means index 0 refers to the first element. Index 1 refers to the second element. The index 2 refers to the third, and 3 refers to the last element. In this case, if you had a list of like 100 elements, then you'd have to continue to follow this rule, but it would be bigger. So that's how you access the first element in a list. But in a dictionary, if you want to access the first element, technically you have to do it like this. Student dictionary. And you're not going to put a number in here. You're not going to use what they call the index number. Instead, you're actually going to use the keys. The keys in each pair are going to be the index. So here I'll say John. So if you look really closely at the output down here, I'm zooming in. On this line right here, I'm printing out John. Or rather, I'm printing out... Sorry, this is printing John. This student list index 0, that's printing out John by using the index number. For the dictionary, it's different. For the dictionary, if you want to access the first element here is actually the first value, which is 20. So you can't use a number. You have to use by using index. No, by using key. By using a key. So here I want to print out 20. So I have to say student dictionary, and then I have to pass John as the index. Not 0, but you're going to pass John's name. This will print out 20, which makes sense for how the dictionary operates. So if we come back to this example here, student is student dictionary, and then brackets student, and then it says years old. This is going to print out each student's name, because remember the student list has all the names. And then this part is going to print out the ages, and we're using the student names as a key, or as an index. So here you're going to say John is, and then it fills this space here with 20. And then the next line, student is Paul. And then this part is going to be 22. And then finally, student will be George. And student dictionary student is going to give you 19. And then at the very end, you'll get Ringo as a student here. And then in this space, you're going to get 23. Because remember, in the dictionary up here, you have a key and a value, a key and a value, a key and a value. And each of these pairs count as elements. But the way you access the elements is different from how you access an element in a list. Also, when I say element, I just mean like the items that are in the collections. And that's it. So if you want to learn more about dictionaries and lists beyond what the book is telling you, there's some links here. And since I added some new comments to this file, I'm gonna just send you this revised copy, and you can make your own version, or you can just study using this. And if anything doesn't make sense for this third example or the first two, just email or text me, okay? So this is the end of the lesson here. Obviously, there is a lot more to lists and dictionaries, but you're gonna need to read about those things on your own, and we can come back and meet again to review that. All right, that's it. I'm finished for today.